What kind of country are we living in? Where the Supreme Court keep correcting lower courts, politicians are branded as saints, and ordinary people can get into trouble for just speaking. So tonight we're talking about contradictions. Welcome to Talk About It with Chidi, the show where we don't avoid uncomfortable truth. I'm your host Chidi, and joining me is Sake. Sake, how you doing?
Very well. Thank you
Very
for having
well.
me on the show.
You're welcome. So today's topic is Nigeria as a country of contradiction, right? That's gonna be where we actually focus more, right? Let's start with the court. We keep seeing the Supreme Court step in and overturn decisions from lower court. Now, on the surface, that looks like justice working. But let me ask, why are these rulings flawed in the first place? Sake, my question to you now is this, Sake. Should Nigerians feel assured or worried due to the reversal of the Supreme Court on the leadership of the ADC? What is your take on that?
I would basically just state categorically, without any interpretation, the justice system in Nigeria is flawed. Whether they overturned the judgment of the lower court or not, is basically flawed. Our justice system is basically for the rich and the influential people. Let me just put it like that. The influential ones are the ones that get justice in Nigeria. And I think if they don't work on the justice system in Nigeria, we'll keep going back and forth about this particular uh, judiciary system. You okay? A high court or appeal court will make a judgment that they know is wrong, only for the Supreme Court to, if the Supreme Court had held to what they did at the appeal level, probably will not even be talking about it. So we need to overhaul our judiciary system because even the process of appointing our judges is flawed. You can't allow the executive to be the one to appoint a judge. In the long run, they will work for the executive, whether you like it or not, because it's basically like an appointment as it stands now. You know, I'll mention the case of that went, I think, was it last year? Yeah, last year. That Wike, I'm mentioning him now without fear or favor. Wike built houses for judges in Abuja, and you expect those judges not to work for Wike. You
So,
don't
but my
expect that.
question now is, we actually did a show about the judiciary a couple of weeks ago. But my question now is that, do you think the protest that they did and the idea of it resulting into like chaos help push the Supreme Court over the edge to do the right thing in naturally
No,
appointing
no,
the
it did.
leadership?
Yes, it affected their decision making, and we ought not to be in that situation. They should know the needful and not wait the citizenry to protest for them to act on any particular case. So yeah, but that protest actually helped in shaping their decision making from whatever the appeal courts uh, judged on. So, but we don't have to wait for protest to happen for our judiciary to function in the right direction.
Well, for me, if the highest court keep correcting mistakes, then the problem is not the outcome; it's actually the system. Because normally, Supreme Court, every case is not supposed to go to the Supreme Court, you know. Like in America, yeah, in a year, the Supreme Court might just take only like 80 cases in the whole year, or sometimes 40, 50, depending on how they feel or what they intend to do at the time or the capacity they have to hear those cases because, they do a lot of preparation, reading, research, and all the stuff, you know. So yeah, the Supreme Court is all cases are not supposed to go to the Supreme Court because at the end of the day, there are some cases the Supreme Court is supposed to stay. Like let's say, for example, the appeals court have given a judgment, and the Supreme Court looks at it and found out that it's a good judgment that follows the Constitution. What you have to do is just put a stay to the judgment rather than having to go all over again, do hearing and give your own judgment. And at the end of the day, it will all sound the same. You know what I mean? So yeah. Well, let's move forward a little bit. So before we move to the next topic, which is the major crops of our conversation today, I have some videos here. I think while you're speaking, I will transfer those videos and kind of put them on for me to make my point. Do you know what happened in the Supreme Court judgment on PDP? Because I think they gave like two rulings, right? Like the factional part of it. Do you know any information about that?
Wike is holding sway in one part of it, and I think they recognize his aspect of things is the Congress that they held regarding their leadership. I think I think they still awarded to him. Well, I would say to him because he's the one basically. He has basically just destroyed PDP, and they allowed him to do that. And I think he also still won at the Supreme Court. I'm not very certain, but I think he won. But he's basically PDP now. Like you know,
Like he owned
I've
the
never,
party.
yeah, I've never seen a situation where you are working for an opposition and you are still holding sway in the opposition.
You think he's gonna run for president?
He's
I
not
think
going
he's
to run.
gonna. I think
No,
he's
no, no,
gonna.
he's not going
I
to
think he's
run.
gonna backstart Tinubu and run for president.
He will not. He will not run. He will not run. He only probably will run after. Okay, probably okay. Tinubu loses the because I know Tinubu is going to lose the next election. Almost certain he's going to lose it. So he is not going to be bold enough to challenge Tinubu this particular second tenure. He only will wait for maybe after Tinubu has lost because Tinubu would say, I am so, if disgruntled is the right word, I'm pissed that we are running a system that is not functioning and we the youth, we know, I will not even call us youth anymore, but the youth are just basically just looking at the system crumble us because we are crumbling, whether we like it or not. We are basically just surviving the month in, month out.
So what can
As
the
those of us,
youth do? What can the youth do, or what should the youth be doing? What, in your own opinion?
my opinion basically is let's resist certain things. We don't have to go violent, but we should resist a lot of things that we are condoning. We are condoning a lot of things from these political allies that we ought to resist. But the thing is, the leaders or those that ought to lead, in quote now, are basically fighting themselves. You know, on social media, they just bully themselves like that. When they ought to come together and, give a clear direction that we, the youth, should follow the pathway. Because if you talk the truth to power, they will always recognize what we are fighting for. But we are basically just, bullying ourselves, fighting ourselves, and we are instead of joining the ranks together. we are dividing.
Well,
So
that
if look at,
means today's ruling was a positive now, because it seems like
yeah,
that's the only solution now, which is election, where you have an opposition that the people can rally around, right? So that means today's ruling was a
yes,
success. All right, we're gonna
yes,
move on from the Supreme Court. But the other part of it that was not a success is the ruling of PDP, because some people were disappointed that the weakest faction won the judgment. But that is not here or there. So we move on.